So, here's a question for you. What do the founder of social media giant Facebook and Shakespeare have in common? Well, they've both been known to start sentences with the word so. The trend for adopting the word, as well as others like, well, like, absolutely, and you know, seems to be catching. So, is the use of such slang a good way to communicate, or is it an annoying verbal tick and part of a wider dumbing down of the English language? We'll be discussing that in a minute. But first, though, let's have a listen to Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg. Can you count the number of so's?
So, how we're all sharing is changing. And the design of your newsfeed needs to reflect this evolving face of newsfeed. And who you're sharing with. So, of course, we all want to share with our friends and get updates from our friends, but we also want updates from our publications and businesses that we care about, and artists and world leaders. So this is the evolving face of newsfeed and the folks that you're sharing with and want to get updates from. And that's what we want to talk about today, is a design that we think reflects this evolving face of newsfeed. So here's where we are today.
So, enough. Well, to discuss this more, I'm joined by Dr. Bernard Lamb, the president of the Queen's English Society, and speech coach Harry Kay, and Professor Galina Bolden of Rutgers University, who's carried out extensive research into the use of the word so, and she joins us now from New York. Galina, is it too much to say it has become a disease?
I don't think it's too much to say it has become a disease. We use words for particular meaning, and so has particular meaning in the language. So there's certain functions that so does that help us understand each other and help create relationships. In my research, I find that so is used to make connections between ideas. For example, if you want to go back to something early in the conversation, you can use the word so to return to a previous topic. And you can also use the word so to even return to something discussed in the earlier conversation, and in this way make connections between different conversations and show your interest in the other person, the person you're talking to.
Therefore, you think it has a value. There is a proper method to this.
Yes, I do think so. And as a language scholar, I don't tell people what to do and not to do, but I try to describe what people actually do and how they use the language. And in fact, if you look at the data, empirical data on how people use language, it turns out there are functions to words that we don't think have any functions. We have our own opinions and intuitions about language, but when you look at how people actually use language, you discover that those opinions and intuitions are not always true and actually sometimes are wrong. And so is one of those words that we sometimes think is just an empty word that doesn't mean anything. But in my research, I do find that people use it for particular functions. And these functions are kind of important because when you look at
Yes, so I didn't want to cut you off mid-flow, but I just want to bring in Dr. Bernard Lamb and see whether you accept that as a satisfactory explanation.
No, I think if someone uses a word like so or like so often, as soon as they use it, if you're aware that they're using it too often, then you catch on to that, and you're not going to concentrate on what they're saying afterwards. It spoils the message once you start picking up on something like that.
But are you over-pedantic to notice that?
No, I'm reasonably aware of what people are saying and language usage, but I wouldn't agree I'm over-pedantic.
And does it worry you if people split infinitives, end sentences with prepositions or things like that, or do you think that...
Ending sentences with preposition is very often part of a phrasal verb, so it goes with a verb anyway. It's not a sin, it's a matter of style. Split infinitives, you can do it, but you should do it if you've got a good reason for it. The point of these language, not rules, but guidances, is someone can achieve an effect by breaking them. If you don't have these guidances, you can't achieve an effect by breaking them.
But don't you think that language adapts, and actually what is key is not the formal arrangements of the bits of grammar, but whether you can make yourself understood and whether you can communicate with somebody?
Yes, I agree entirely. The effective communication is what the Queen's English Society is all about and favours most.
OK, let me come to you, Harry. Do you think this is important?
I think I agree with both people. I think Galina made the point that starting a sentence with "so" encourages your audience to corral all of the previous information they've got and think about it when you start that sentence. But I also very much agree with Bernard that it's simply about how effective you're being, and if you're going to be breaking rules, to be breaking them intentionally. To be able to speak properly is more important if you're going to be speaking to somebody who's in charge of the Speaking Properly Society.
But Galina, let me bring you back in here, because I'm sure that 10 years ago, I was suddenly aware. I used to go to, you know, and occasionally be at a conference in America, and about 3, 4, 5 years ago, suddenly all the MBA students who'd graduated were starting their sentences with "so" in a way that was just new to me, and I hadn't noticed it before.
Yeah, you know, it seems to be a trend to use "so" more commonly. And in my research, I looked at conversations that were recorded in the 1960s up to 2000s. And by looking at a particular kind of "so" that begins questions and new topics, I could actually see an increase, or notice an increase in the usage of "so" from the 1960s to 2000s. So that does seem to be possibly a trend. Now, it's very hard to tell why something is a trend, why language changes, because it's a very complex phenomena, and there may be many possible reasons for it.
What do you think? Did you notice other words, I wanted to ask you, or other phrases that have kind of come into common usage which weren't there before?
Yeah, I think there are some words that, you know, come in and out of fashion, or phrases come in and out of fashion. Right now, my colleagues and I at Rutgers, we look at how people respond to something with the phrase "I know." And again, we find something that we might not expect. We think maybe when people say "I know," they actually mean that they know something, it's about knowledge. But actually, people may say "I know," or "I know," and in this way indicate that they're sympathetic with the other person, or they affiliate with the other person. And again, so there's a little bit of a difference between what people think the words mean and how they're used. And it's interesting to look at that, and to look at that at the data.
Harry, let me just bring you in there. When you have got someone who you are coaching, what are the things you think, I've got to bash this out of him or her? They can't go on doing that because it's a roadblock, it's an obstruction to their being effective communicators.
The only thing I get people to stop doing is to think about what they should stop doing. I think that is the least effective way of changing your speech, because all you end up doing is starting a sentence with "so" or saying the word "like" and then going, "Ah, I'm doing it again, I'm doing it again." And it doesn't give you anything else to do in the meantime. So what I encourage people to do is think of something else they want to say in that space, or just take a breath and think.
And also, I mean, I think that the interesting thing about this, Bernard Lamb, is that don't you want people to be authentic? I don't care. I don't expect certain people to speak like they are Shakespearean actors when they are doing kind of, you know, whatever job it happens to be. You just want to get them to communicate, you know, with enthusiasm, with passion, with commitment, or whatever it happens to be.
Yes, yes, certainly. Don't expect them all to speak like Shakespeare. They should speak like themselves. But they should also be aware of the audience they're addressing and use appropriate speech for them. So if you're talking to a highbrow audience, you can use more high-flown language than to a group of people at the opposite end of the spectrum. You've got to use the appropriate language. And if you're talking to a group of teenagers who say "like" every 5 words, you don't have to do the same to show empathy with them.
No,
that's a really annoying habit. I'm going to the cinema "like" on Monday, like this, like that. There are these verbal tics which are extremely annoying, and I would discourage people from using them.
When my kids were that age, I used the word "like" all the time just to take the mickey out of them and hope that they would stop when they thought the absurdity of me using "like" every other word "like." So anyway, there we are. So we're done. Thank you all very much indeed. That was great to have you with us, and really interesting and fun and important discussion as well.